Welcome to my 2015 Astrology Forecast. I'm Benjamin Bernstein with astroshaman.com. Among my credentials are that I host This Week in Astrology, which is iTunes' #1 astrology podcast, and in 2014 I was voted Western North Carolina's best astrologer. So you know at least that I have some credentials to stand behind me, so I'm qualified to give you a forecast. In any event, that's all the preamble. Let's now get into the forecast. I'm here to give you the forecast for 2015. This is a cooperative venture, so I don't want to be the only one talking here. So if anyone at any point has any thoughts around the charts we're looking at, I sure hope you'll speak up and speak your piece. Many of my charts, especially the lunation charts, are two. First, I'm going to have the full chart without any aspect lines in the middle. And then I'm going to move to what I consider are the big aspects that the lunation is actually making, which is why I chose it. I'm not going to put up all the new and full moons for 2015. And of course there will be many other types of aspects as well. So let's dive right in. Just as an overview piece, probably the big headline of 2015 is the final Uranus-Pluto square of a long series. I'll talk more about that when I get to the slide. And that even though the Uranus-Pluto square ends in 2015, in my opinion, its effects are going to be felt through the rest of the decade. And whenever a planet such as Mars will be doing a couple times this year comes and lines up with it by quadrature, which means it's a conjunction, an opposition, or a square, then it's going to get restimulated again. So even though the last exact hit is March of 2015, it is in no way behind us. As I was mentioning before we started, in the 60s, you know, the Uranus-Pluto square is a part of a large 120 to 150 year cycle. You know, depending on how fast things are moving, it takes anywhere from 120 to 150 years from Uranus-Pluto conjunct to when they come back together again, much later. And that's a journey, and now we're just a quarter of the way through that journey that started in the 60s and now is revved up with the 60s part 2. There will still be the 60s part 3 and 4 to come, you know, for the next 100 years or so. So it's a very long kind of thing to look at. So I just wanted to, and in the 60s, for example, the Uranus and Pluto were conjunct in 64 through 66. I believe they made 5 conjunctions in the 60s. But the real shift didn't hit the fan until 68. You know, the really big stuff didn't happen until then. So very often the exact hits kind of set the foundation, and the tree, like the seed, starts to sprout then, but the tree starts to grow, and then often the most powerful effects aren't felt till later. So that's something to remember when you're doing, you know, predictive work like this. So that'll be the headline, but we'll have lots else to cover here. Again, please, any questions or comments or contributions to the subject, I hope you will shout out. Don't even just raise your hand, just say what you want to say. Yes, Ronnie.
Are you going to lay this over the United States chart?
I will. What I want to do is just do the chart in general first, and then we'll do the U.S. chart and run it that way.
What location are you using for the general chart?
Actually, I would prefer you think of no location whatsoever. Actually, I did run them for Asheville. But for practical purposes, this whole series of charts, just assume there's no houses at all. The houses are irrelevant. And my own bias is toward individual client consultation. I'm more of an individual counselor than a mundane astrologer who looks at the effect on the world. So most of what I say tonight will be in reference to how can you use these things for your own personal, you know, benefit and growth, rather than making like concrete predictions about what I think is going to happen out in the world. That's not my specialty. But if anyone here is a specialist, then feel free to shout out your ideas about that. That would be a lovely contribution to make. Okay, so I mentioned Uranus and Pluto, and we kick right off on January 4th with a full moon. And this is the full moon in Cancer, with the moon around 14.5 Cancer. And what's special about it, of course, is that it lines up with the Uranus-Pluto square. The Sun and Pluto are conjunct down in Capricorn. Uranus is over in Aries, of course, and it's making a big old T-square. Does anyone not know what a T-square is? Okay, a T-square is a right triangle. So here that's an opposition, 180 degrees, and a square is 90 degrees, and a T-square is an opposition plus 2 squares. So the grand cross I'm showing actually contains 4 T-squares all woven together. So, but in this one, I also noted that the nodes were tightly into the T-square as well, so I wanted to include them in the illustration. So to me, now of course, new moon and full moons have different meanings. A new moon is a beginning period, and a full moon is a take stock and let go or adjust energy. So it's kind of weird to be starting the year with a full moon, which is about release as opposed to starting. But nonetheless, I think with a full moon like this, the moon's sign is often your keynote to how to make the best use of it. So with the moon in Cancer, that's about family and nurturing and healing, domestic matters. And of course with Uranus and Pluto lining up with that. Uranus and Pluto, my two-word keynote for those two guys is revolutionary transformation. So anytime those two are working together, big change can happen really fast. So good time on January 4th when that full moon hits to take stock of everything represented by the moon. My family, how's that going? The home itself where you live in is a moon effect. Now the moon in this chart is actually in Cancer, the sign it rules. So the moon and Cancer are synonyms astrologically here. So just a good time to take stock what needs to shift in the way I'm nurturing myself, the way I'm nurturing others, my home, my family, maybe how I'm relating with members of my family, either my family I grew up with, the family I've created through marriage. And just another thing I recommend when Uranus and Pluto are in the game is intuitive flashes get really important. How many of y'all know when you get an intuitive flash? Okay, yeah, some people call it a gut feeling. There's just no doubt about it the moment it hits. And one way when I try to explain to clients what is an intuitive flash, I say the core thing I can say that it's the bottom line definition is the moment that thought hits you, absolutely know it's true. There's no doubt about it. You may doubt it a moment later, and your mind may jump in and naysay it, but that didn't change the fact that the moment it hit, you were certain about it. And very often there's an electrical phenomenon in the body. You get, goosebumps or shivers or a tingle up your spine, or there's some sort of somatic things telling you, hey, that was not just another thought. That was something really powerful. I also call those text messages from God. Yes, Ronnie.
Actually, you only have one asteroid here. Why did you choose Vesta?
I chose Vesta because it's the only asteroid goddess that's in quadrature with the lunation.
Do you have anything to say about her participation?
I will, but I'm getting to that. There's a lot to cover.
Sorry. Am I okay here?
What?
Am I okay here?
I'll check when you sit down. We'll see if it's in the line of sight of the camera. No, you are out of frame. You're fine.
Oh.
Okay. Mostly. If you actually scoot about a foot to the right, that'll be even better. Okay. Just kind of off the edge of the table. Thank you very much. So with Uranus, it's about follow the intuitive flash. Most people I ask about this, in fact everybody, when I ask, did things go better when you followed the intuitive flash or when you second guessed it, they always say, I should have gone with the intuitive flash. When I tried to override it, things kind of got messed up. I'll just go ahead and talk a lot about Uranus-Pluto now so we don't have to cover it again when we hit them later. To me, I'm going to focus a lot on the high side of these possibilities. I personally believe, even though this chart's full of squares and oppositions with the planets I've highlighted, I don't think there's such a thing as a bad aspect or a bad planet in astrology. It's all just raw material, and it's how you choose to partner with it that creates the outcome. So to me, it's just what are the two planets' meanings and how can I productively put them together is the core of a definition. I will never doubt that a square is challenge for growth and a Uranus is potential conflict, but could also be just harmonious interaction. So with Uranus, step one is to be your unique weird-ass self. Uranus is the planet of the weirdo and the eccentric and the unconventional person. And so if there's a part of you that wants to be expressed in a unique, unconventional way, even though others, say, oh, you should be more normal, please come back to the fold. That's a good way to use Uranus, is to follow your unique path. The second is the intuitive flash I talked about. The third is once you've developed that unique gift so that you've gotten good at it, then contribute to the greater good with it. Serve the collective with that unique thing you developed in the first place. That's my kind of 3-point general Uranus prescription for high-level use. The way you'll know you're not using it well is you get all jangly and nervous and irritable, because Uranus has strong effect on the nervous system, and if you're having a lot of nervousness and irritability and agitation in your life, it may be a sign that you've got some Uranian thing going on, or an Aquarian thing, which is the same energy really, and you're somehow not doing one of those three things. I've had many clients tell me that when they got on track with following their intuitive flash, being their unique self, serving the collective with their gifts, that the nervousness and agitation they were feeling calmed down quite a bit. So it's worth noting. the planets kind of let us know when you're getting one of its negative aspects or one of its negative effects. Just take that same energy to the high side, and you may find that it helps resolve it. Is the way I've always used astrology. Pluto, the other game here, is death and rebirth. It's in astrology, ironically, the further away they are, the more powerful they become in terms of moving planets. It's because the farther away they are, the longer they stay affecting something. Instead of a rainstorm passing over a city in an hour, a Pluto transit is like a rainstorm that lasts for 3 years. It just doesn't go away for a long time. But Pluto's a wonderful guy too, because you want the guy to take away what doesn't serve you anymore. And Pluto is like the trash collector. He says, okay, let's take everything that doesn't serve you and get rid of it. So Pluto's a wonderful energy under which to say, what do I need to release at any level, whether it's physical or relational or energetic. And the more you release, then the more you step into your power. And your power, of course, I love the glyph of Pluto because to me it looks like a person raising their arms and surrendering to God and saying, use me, just take me, use me for your higher good. And in my own life, what I've experienced is the more I have made that surrender, the more powerful I've become. And everyone I know who's done that tells me the same thing. The more you allow the ego to be guided by your inner wisdom, those intuitive flashes, it's like more and more power can come through you because you're becoming a more open vessel. So that's my recommendation on how to use Pluto. Now, dark side Pluto, if you see this effect coming in strongly in any kind of the aspects we'll be looking at this year, Pluto can manifest as powerful people trying to dominate or control you. The negative archetypes of Pluto are like Darth Vader or Hitler. My will be done. You will do what I say kind of people. So that you want to watch out for that. But at the same time, I've also noted that you typically only get those kind of confrontations in your life when you haven't stepped into your own power fully enough yet. So when you hit that, often it's a challenge to you, can I step more fully into my power so that I equal or exceed the power of the thing I'm being challenged with? Can I come into my own fullness? And again, that's not ego fullness. That's not, the ego running it. That's, again, that surrender where you get power way beyond what the ego can engage by itself. So that's, my way of using Uranus and Pluto. And as this, I know I've spent a lot of time on this full moon, but again, what I mainly am doing with this is teaching you about Uranus and Pluto so that when they come up again and again, I don't have to keep explaining them again. So the full moon itself is not worth the time I spent on it, but I did want to teach you about Uranus and Pluto. Okay, so any questions about the Uranus-Pluto aspect of this? To touch briefly on the other members of this grand cross that's part of the full moon, the nodes of the moon are, does anyone not know what the nodes of the moon are? Or not familiar with their meaning? Okay, all right. So just very briefly, it's like, let's just shorthand it to say it's the axis of destiny. When those guys show up in a pattern, it means, am I doing what I'm here to do in terms of my life purpose? Not just the expediency of the moment, but am I actually stepping into my soul purpose here? So a great thing to be thinking about as this full moon is very late on January 4th is, am I in alignment with my soul purpose, and what revolutionary transformation can I make to move into track with it? This is really so beautifully timed with all these New Year's resolutions that are going to be happening around that time. So it's really lovely. And I love the full moon itself because we don't start life on January 1st. We've already got things going, so the adjustment factor of the full moon really fits well here, I think. And the asteroid goddess, Vesta. My general meaning of her, the most broad meaning of Vesta is just service to a higher cause. The Vestal virgins of Rome were worshippers of the goddess Vesta, who was one of Rome's major goddesses in ancient times. And they kind of devoted their lives to this higher calling. And to me, that's another meaning you can bring to the full moon. How can I make a revolutionary transformation, align with my life purpose, to come into alignment with my real calling here? It's not just about me doing something that benefits me just individually. How can what I do benefit the collective as well? So that's a lot of information on a single full moon. Any questions? All right. I'm going to take my watch off so I can track the time more easily. All right, next aspect. So here again is the next significant thing I see happening in 2015. Again, this is the full moon, February 3rd. And again, that's just the whole chart. And if for any reason we need to come back and look at any other planets besides the ones I'm highlighting, just holler at me. If you want to come back and see another planet, we can come back to these slides after I come to the detail piece like this. Okay? So here again is the same full moon, but now I've only included the planets and aspect lines that were of interest to me. I thought this full moon was interesting because it's so full of aspects. Look at all this. I mean, slower planets. It's a full moon in Leo, around 15 Leo. So I've got a trine from Uranus. I've got a quincunx, that 150-degree angle from Pluto. So I've got 2 of the 3 outer planets engaged. I got a Chiron quincunx. I got Mars. I got Jupiter on the moon. You know, all but 2 of the planets Jupiter out are involved in this lunation by aspect, and that makes it really strong. So when you get a full moon in Leo, then Leo, has more meanings than any other sign of the zodiac. Among them would be the queen or king. So there's a strong leadership vibe of Leo. It's the performer in the spotlight. I have Leo rising personally, so I know that energy a little bit myself. Leo is also children or your inner child. Leo is taking risk, it's speculating. Leo is also rest and relaxation. Leo has quite a broad variety of meanings. So anything, as you get another full moon, which is again, take stock of it, adjust as needed, think, how am I doing on any of those qualities that I'm engaged in? To have Jupiter conjunct the moon, the core meaning of Jupiter is simply expand it and make it bigger. Whenever Jupiter comes into contact with something, it makes it even larger than it would have been otherwise. It is the largest planet in the solar system other than the Sun, right? So, and Jupiter, its ancient meaning is like good luck, expansion. It's the great benefic in ancient astrology. So, a lot of people, it wouldn't be too hard to read, wow, good luck on that full moon if I play it right. So a little bit of extra fortune in the mix for me as well. To me, there are a number of interesting patterns in this full moon. The one that really gets my attention is the Yod, which we're going to be seeing as a standalone event soon also. That may even be the next slide. But I want you to note that on a Yod, okay, Y-O-D, that's where Yoda comes from. Add the A. I'm kidding. A Yod is 2 quincunxes and a sextile. So let me see if my magic little guy works here. Just a minute. It's a pointer. Let's see. Okay, so here's the moon here, and back here is Pluto. And there's a quincunx from Pluto to the moon. And then Chiron back here also makes a quincunx, that 150-degree connection, the green dashed dot line. And then Chiron and Pluto are making a sextile to each other. Okay? In fact, I'm going to jump ahead and see if, in fact, this thing is where I think it is. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the odd here as a standalone just to make it clear. I will come back to this. But here you see Jupiter on the tip and Chiron and Pluto on the back end. So this is the configuration I'm talking about. It just so happens that at the new moon we're talking about, the moon is up here with Jupiter as well, 15 Leo, right where Jupiter is. So this is the aspect pattern I'm talking about shown by itself. And now we'll come back to the actual lunation. Okay. So it is buried in there among all those lines. In past presentations, when I had all the aspect lines in the middle, you got such a cluttered chart, it makes me confused. So I've taken out the lines unless they were actually important. This is probably the most cluttered chart we'll get tonight. So when you have Chiron and Pluto on the back end, they actually share a common meaning. Chiron and Pluto both have a meaning of shamanic energy. So Pluto is like the psychologist. He's diving into the depths, into the deep mysteries, into the shadows, and bringing this stuff up to be, transmuted and cleared. Chiron does the same thing. That's the wounded healer. Okay, so Chiron and Pluto on the back end of a Yod is a very powerful. Already we've got a lot of healing, releasing, transforming, deep, intense inner process vibe is very strong with those guys. And then the Yod's meaning, its nickname is the finger of God. Kelly Lee Phipps, who many of you knew before he passed, always said the finger of God means do this or else. So it's a sense of there's an urgency here to do this. So what I would say is the full moon of February 3rd has an expanded meaning of really get into your intense transformation. If necessary, Moon and Leo, do it dramatically. In my own life, many of you know I've done plant spirit work, like with ayahuasca and San Pedro for years, and that's a very intense process. And lately I've gotten into breath work. I've done like 3 flavors of breath work just in the last 3 months, and have any of you all done therapeutic breathwork processes? Okay, so many of you have. People can be screaming and writhing around and releasing their inner child, and there's loud, intense music playing, and to me, breathwork is like a perfect example of the kind of energy that this full moon's talking about, and it's legal. So it might be interesting if you feel like you've got some intense therapeutic work to do, then this would be a great energy to really get that going under sometime around the full moon. And as we all know, things are at the most intense around the full moon. The gravitation of the moon is really strong there, and the tides are high and all that. So emotions run high too, and because you've kind of got a kickstart, the early February time frame might be really sweet to do some kind of therapeutic modalities with that yod in the air. So in the larger picture, the Jupiter-Pluto-Chiron is going to be around for a while, many weeks. But when you get something like this stimulating it, then you get the effect of the stage setter and the trigger. How many of you all understand the transiting concept of the stage has to be set by a slower guy before a quicker guy can come and make it happen? Okay, right. So in this case, the yod is sort of the stage, and it just so happens the moon and sun are here stimulating it and saying, right in the early part of February here would be a great time to do something along those lines, or any kind of healing therapeutic process that feels good to you. Mars conjunct Chiron amplifies it more. Uranus up in Aries is trining the moon and sending that electricity, that potential for sudden big change is available with him. It's really it's one of the strongest lunations we're going to have in the whole year. So big change, therapeutic stuff would be, I think, really well supported. As you can see, there's other planets here too, but I don't want to go on forever. One small flavor I'll add to it, though, is we do have the asteroid goddess Pallas Athena down here, and she is connecting very smoothly up to the moon as well. And I shorthand her as the asteroid goddess who kicks butt and takes names. She is the warrior goddess who sprang fully armored from the head of Zeus in the myth, and she is the goddess who talks about feminine assertiveness and go make it happen, stand up and lead when it's time to lead kind of energy. And she's also a master strategist, and she's very good at practical creativity. So any of those qualities that you feel like you would like more of in your life, or if on the other you've got too much of it going and you want to tone it down, working with those aspects either way would be really sweet under this February 3rd full moon. So any questions or comments on this lunation before we move on? Yes?
This really looks to me like an elaboration and a greater complexity from the January full moon. Like the January full moon, which was the sun conjunct Pluto and Vesta, and the nodes were beginning to kind of activate Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, there's similar themes with the moon being in Leo this time and talking to Pluto so strongly and talking to Chiron so strongly. It's like I see the continuation and the deeper, kind of getting really deep really fast in the same theme.
Yeah, the plot thickens.
Yeah.
Yes, Ronnie?
Along that theme, I feel like the full moon in Cancer Capricorn is more emotional. In Cancer, and then you're moving to the moon in Leo, which is more about heart. So I think there's a great calling for heart to be out, to show, to be open, to come from the heart, and I think that's kind of what the finger of God is pointing at.
Yeah, I like that.
Or else, yes.
Sweet. Any other thoughts or comments? Questions?
If your sun is on one of these, does that make it stronger?
Yeah, obviously we're talking about just general sky transits. If one of these events lines up on a sensitive point in your chart, the sun or any other really sensitive point, you'll feel it where you live. And the specific way it will affect you depends on what that planet stands for in your natal chart. Okay.
Is Saturn missing?
What I'm doing when I do sort of these close-ups, I'm only putting in the planets that are making strong aspect to the points I'm talking about. So by definition, I'm leaving out certain planets in order to highlight. Again, I can come back to I can come back to, like here, all the planets are in this view of it.
Yeah.
So Saturn's in there, but he's just not a major player in this particular pattern. He's out there at 4 degrees. He's not anywhere near aspecting any of the action in this particular chart.
You might want to mention Saturn's leaving Scorpio.
I will get to that.
Oh, yeah.
That is in the presentation. Okay, believe me, if it's important, I got it covered. All right, any other questions on this one? Okay, next up. Then we have a new moon on February 18. Again, this is the broad chart with all the planets. But the stuff I thought was important is that it's part of the Neptune, the developing Saturn-Neptune square, which is one of my all-time favorite aspects. But for good reason, too. And this new moon, we've got two lunations that are at the very edge of a sign. This is the first one. This is a Aquarius. I mean, it doesn't get much later than 29 degrees, 59 minutes Aquarius. That's barely an Aquarius. I mean, they're just seconds out of coming into Pisces here. But it is an Aquarian new moon, technically. And of course, I've already talked, when all that stuff I said about Uranus, same thing for Aquarius. The revolution, paradigm shift, be your unique self, follow your intuitive flash to serve the collective, all that's Aquarius. There's a concept called the astrology alphabet where we say there's a planet, a sign, and a house that all mean just the same thing. And that's why Uranus and Aquarius are both members of that 11th astrology alphabet letter. So the reason I picked this lunation as an interesting one, now later in the year we're going to see Saturn and Neptune come to an exact square. And I love Neptune and Saturn because they are the very archetype of the law of attraction, one of my more favorite subjects. In fact, on my website, astroshaman.com, there's actually an article called an astrological signature for the law of attraction. And to me, it's all about Neptune and Saturn. Now, these have meanings besides the ones I'm about to tell you, but in this context, Neptune is visualization and imagination, and Saturn is crystallization and making it concrete in the physical world. And for years, I have been watching my clients' charts. Anytime I see a strong Saturn-Neptune aspect in the chart, I ask them about law of attraction if I can. And without fail, even if they don't even know what I mean, when I ask them the question, if there's something you really want and you fantasize about it a lot and you're seeing it real vividly in your mind, and as you're fantasizing, you have a lot of strong feeling about it, does that thing tend to show up pretty quickly for you? And they say, yeah, I guess it does. So you're using law of attraction. You didn't even know it. So that is the basic recipe, is visualizing in detail a strong emotional content. That's how the universe knows what you're wanting. And thus, when we get a new moon, new beginnings with a strong law of attraction setup, Neptune-Saturn, in alignment with it, Neptune's conjunct the Sun and Moon, Saturn to square them, this is a particularly good new moon for manifesting. So I would recommend, this new moon hits on February 18, get your anything you need to start or refresh in terms of a goal that you want to visualize and make real. You've got a lot of juice on this new moon because of the law of attraction factor. Now Neptune and Saturn interact in other ways as well. Neptune dissolves any structures, Saturn, that don't serve you anymore. So it's also a good time to say, wow, what structures do I need to release out? Law of attraction is not so much about visualizing what you don't want, because all the universe knows is the image in your mind, and it's not saying, I don't want this universe, and that's not how it works. You just get more of it. All it knows is the picture you're sending. But if you can visualize the positive opposite of that thing you don't want anymore, say, hey, I want this, and this automatically negates having the other, then visualizing the positive opposite, which is called the pivot technique, is, I think, a more powerful way to release something by visualizing. That was a little bit of a tangent. Did you all keep up with me?
Oh, that's a pivot technique?
Pivot. P-I-V-O-T. Actually, I learned that indirectly through the woman who channels the law of attraction being.
Esther Hicks?
Yeah, Esther Hicks. Sorry, I couldn't bring the name up right then. So that new moon on February 18, I think, is especially good for that. And again, anything new with the Aquarian theme like I talked about. Any questions on this one before we move along? All right. So then we've got the Yod, which I've already talked about at length. I do want to take a note here, though. Hang on a second. Oh, did I not download that? Okay. My recollection is that we've got about a month before and after, maybe 3 weeks before and after. Jupiter's moving fairly quickly retrograde at this point. So even though this Yod with Jupiter, Chiron, and Pluto is peaking here February 23rd, it starts in early February, and I believe it goes through about mid-March in terms of the window I'm using for that Yod actually to be in existence. So as I've already said, this is an amazing energy for healing, transformation, deep, intense transformational work, even if it's dramatic, like I was talking about with lunation. And you basically, it's strongest on February 23rd when they're making their tightest alignment with each other. As you can see, that's a pretty tight little pattern. Everything's lining up within like 1.5 degrees, the 3 planets, which is pretty tight for an aspect pattern. So good time to take that juju you might have started with the lunation that involved it. So we'll move on from that unless you've got any questions or comments. One of the things that's coming to me around this, actually, a secondary meaning. There's no end to the number of interpretations you can put on an aspect pattern. They're endless, okay? But Jupiter in Leo is a pretty blatant teacher signature. Jupiter is the guru, or the teacher of higher things, the philosopher, the one who's given the high teaching. Like we say that Mercury is like K through 12 teacher, Jupiter is college on up, and beyond that is beyond academia, the philosopher, the spiritual teacher, and all that. So if you are called to be a teacher of healing or transformation, wow, what an amazing, perfect archetypal hit this is. Chiron, the mentor and the healer, and Pluto, you're surrendering to the divine power and letting it come through you in a really practical way, Pluto in Capricorn. And then Jupiter, the teacher, in Leo, out in the spotlight. So if you are so inclined, and I know there are those in this room who do that, then that period in the latter part of February is especially strong for getting out there and doing your teaching in whatever way you do it. Okay, then in March we've got a let's see, I'm moving forward, not backwards, right? Yes. Okay. Take a second. All right. So next in March we've got a full moon, and again the March 5th full moon here is all the planets. As you see, I used the 4 asteroid goddesses along with the usual guys. But the things I thought were interesting about the full moon are a lot of things. Another busy aspect pattern. But to me, let me see, what was the big juice that I saw here? To me, it's really a Chiron-Neptune full moon that's really the big show here. So the sun being the filling in a Chiron-Neptune sandwich, and the opposition to the moon there, to me, just it pretty much continues for me the theme of healing and spiritual transformation. Spiritual mentoring is another way we can put Chiron and Neptune in the same sentence together. So again, adjustments around healing, spiritual matters, spiritual healing, spiritual mentoring, to me are pretty juicy there. We've got, again, Uranus and Pluto in the mix. Pluto's trine the moon, Uranus is quincunx. And there's another personal planet in the mix too. Again, you can say I've only picked things that are somewhere near 15 degrees to show on the chart here. But Venus is there, aspecting the moon by quincunx. She's also conjunct Uranus, so there's a sub-theme in the March 5th full moon about relationship transformation. And of course, healing and transformation, most of us get triggered mostly for that through relationship, don't we? I think it's a whole lot more challenging to be a spiritual person when you're in a relationship than when you're on your own, sitting alone in a cave or something, right? So, nothing like, in my own work with Kimberly Crow, my partner, she's been such an amazing catalyst for me to reflect back, here's where you're stuck, here's where you need to clear. And, my growth has accelerated hugely by being in a relationship with her. I'm super grateful to be with her. So don't be surprised if around the full moon March 5th, if you get some more than usual amount of relationship triggers. Well, there's Uranus and Venus together aspecting the moon, so no surprise there. Maybe with a quincunx you'll have to make an adjustment to go to the next level of your work. You may have noticed my predisposition in interpreting astrology is I'm assuming you're a conscious person working on yourself. If you just want to be told what's going to happen to you and get all fatalistic, then this is probably not your lecture. Okay, so any questions on this particular full moon?
Are we seeing a kite?
Are we seeing a kite? I'm not seeing one. No.
Okay.
Close but no cigar. We've got trines and sextiles, but they don't quite come together that way. All right, so then I was interested on March 11th to see that we have a intense little Uranus. Again, here we have the stage that Uranus and Pluto are about to come exact square for the last time here on March 11th. They're a few days off. But Mars has come along, and Mars conjuncts Uranus and squares Pluto on the same day, March 11th, because Uranus and Pluto are so close together. They're being hit simultaneously. So what I would expect is around March 11th could be a more volatile day than usual. I mean, Mars, Uranus, I mean, that's sudden shocking things. On the dark side, that can be violence and accidents and, crazy stuff happening. My favorite way to use Uranus and Mars together is to get the intuitive flash Uranus and act on it Mars. And like I've said before, if you take the energy and use it on the high side, it doesn't have as much juice left over to bother you on the low side. And so if you've got a big transformation to make, Mars is in Aries. Mars and Aries are the same letter of the astrology alphabet. The first one, it's about initiation, pioneer, warrior, make it happen. And there's a tremendous amount of juice in the air here with Mars, Uranus, and Pluto in alignment around March 11th to kick off things in a really big way. The fact that it also is in alignment with the nodes, again, the axis of destiny, that's a suggestion, well, whatever you're kicking off around March 11th, maybe you should make sure that it's in alignment with your life purpose, what you're here to do. To me, the suggestion of Uranus and Mars on the south node, which is the horseshoe with the opening at the top there, is a suggestion that maybe some old karma will get simulated for you. Maybe some of the stuff you came to clear and release will get triggered in a possibly dramatic and unexpected or surprising way. So if so, say, yay, more stuff to clear. As soon as I get rid of that, I'll be lighter and brighter. So that's kind of my take on the setup on March 11th there with Uranus and Mars and Pluto. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, onward. Then the final, the final exact Uranus-Pluto square on March 16. Okay? So again, this time I just gave everyone, I showed Uranus and Pluto by the thick red line. I had to erase all the other lines out of the graphic. But there is the exact hit, both planets at 15 degrees, 18 minutes, Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries. So that's the last exact Uranus-Pluto square. But as I said at the beginning of the presentation, they ain't done. Okay? They will be felt for the rest of the decade. This is like a 14-year effect. They started being felt around 2006, and they will be felt through 2020. So revolutionary transformation is still the theme of the decade. Yes?
When did they start? When was 7 of 7? When was the first one?
The first exact one was 2012.
Okay.
So that was the first exact Uranus-Pluto square, and there have been 7 of them up through, 7 exact hits. But again, as I watched them, the day when they were exact, often there was no major news headline. It's not the slow guys that set the timing, it's the quicker guys. In fact, I would dare say, on the 11th, when Mars is on Uranus, we're probably more likely to have a big shocking event than we're likely to have on the 16th when Uranus and Pluto are exactly square, because then we had a trigger and here we don't. Not as strongly. Does that make sense?
And you're saying this is the last one until when? 50 years?
It'll be. I didn't track forward because I may not be alive by then. But well, let's put it this way: it was mid 60s, and here it is so it was 50 years for the first round to hit along.
Okay.
Yeah. Now it won't take a full 50 years each time because the cycle. Does anyone know whether this particular cycle is running 120 or 150 years? This particular Uranus-Pluto run. But it's a long time.
Okay.
So we'll have several decades will pass before they come to their opposition. And if you're interested in the definitive book on how this stuff works, Richard Tarnas, Tarnas, wrote a masterwork called Cosmos and Psyche, Cosmos and Psyche, and he spent 30 years writing it. Man, this guy's serious. It's like a 650-page book, and it tracks the outer planet alignments, the conjunctions and oppositions mainly of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto through all of recorded history. I am not exaggerating. And it's social, it's political, it's cultural, military, governments rising and falling. And he shows just time after time after time that the archetypal meanings of those 3 planets, when they come into a conjunction or as opposition and sometimes a square, down the line, the world changes when they align up. So if you want the definitive work that I'm aware of, I don't know an astrologer who doesn't think that's an amazing book who's read it. So
we almost got him to come and speak here.
Oh, close.
It was close.
Yeah.
But his father was dying or something. He was in the area, but I did email him, so close.
Yeah. And just on a side note, on my podcast This Week in Astrology, I interviewed a guy named Ren Butler, who was a student of Richard Tarnas's out at Esalen. And something I didn't know about Richard Tarnas is he was very involved with breath work and worked a lot with Stanislav Grof, who created holotropic breath work, which is the original, as far as I know, modality of working with that. There's a little story behind that, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. But the book that Ren Butler just wrote, that I interviewed him about, was a book that uses astrology to figure out what are the best times to do things like holotropic breath work or ayahuasca sessions or deep, powerful transformative processes of any kind. And he actually tracks what kind of planetary combinations will create the sort of effects in a particular session. And Tarnas, was working with that with him for years, and Tarnas was documenting that with great care. So I didn't realize Richard Tarnas was also very involved in transformative things like breathwork as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff he's into.
So his book is out?
Yes, it's archetypal. I'm sorry, I can't hold. If the title comes back, I'll let you know. But if you just go to my website, thisweekinastrology.com, for the podcast, it'll link you to the blog, and there you'll see the name of the book is there in the notes. So if you are interested in that, and also it's one of the best cookbooks I've read. He gives every planetary combination, every 2-planet combo that could possibly happen, excluding the asteroid goddesses, and gives some of the most thorough, rich description of how those guys come together that I've ever read. So it's, even if you don't care about transformative breath work, it's an amazing book just to educate you about the planetary archetypes. So, sweet book. And if you would turn your cell phones off, if possible, that would be great. Okay, so again, just to summarize the Uranus-Pluto square, it's revolutionary transformation, and that is the theme of our lives right now. No one is excluded, and you're either transforming voluntarily right now, or you're being taken through it kicking and screaming. This is not a time of history that honors just purring along in your status quo. This is a time when we need to grow and change. My own spiritual take on things is that we are now in a unprecedented revolution of consciousness, and the golden age is now dawning. And even though when we look at the headlines, all we see is the bad stuff happening on the news, what they're not reporting is all the people who are awakening every single day into a more peaceful, abiding state of being. But it is happening more and more, I believe. And all the crazy we're seeing out in the world is a lot of the old stuff that doesn't work anymore, breaking down the old hierarchical, patriarchal order, I will control you kind of vibe, coming down a piece at a time, and already new things are spontaneously arising to take their place. So there's a lot of dust in the air, a lot of really intense stuff happening, as anyone who watches the headlines knows. But I just want to remind you that there is a beautiful new blossoming happening. When the 2012 thing hit the Mayan calendar, that was not the end of time. That was the end of a huge, long 5,000 plus year cycle. And the cycle we're in now, they call the Age of Flowers. To me, that sounds pretty cool. All right, so any questions on Uranus-Pluto square? All right. So that's the headline of the year. Okay? That technically done, but nowhere near energetically done. Okay. All right, then, now, originally I was only going to include one of the 4 eclipses that are happening in 2015, but I'll go ahead and at least give them some mention, even if I don't feel like that eclipse has a huge particular effect. This is one of the eclipses I do want to note, but it didn't seem like one of the especially powerful ones for most people. Now this one is interesting too. I mentioned there's some lunations that are very late in a sign. The solar eclipse on March 20 has the sun and moon at 29.5 Pisces. So they're in the very last degree of the zodiac. So, and again, here we have the conundrum again. If there's a degree about wrapping things up, it would be the last degree of Pisces, right? But it's a new moon beginning. So to me, it occurs, the Alpha and the Omega all right there together. How interesting. And now I tend to figure the power of eclipses has something to do with how close the nodes are to the moon and the sun. And this one is actually, not quite a medium strength based on that. Does it make sense to you all that how close the sun and moon are to the nodes would have a strong bearing on how powerful the thing is? That would be a big factor. And this one is, you can have up to 18 degrees of distance between the luminaries, the sun and moon, and the nodes, and still have it be an eclipse. And this is about 12, 13 degrees away. So not a super strong one. That's why I wasn't originally that excited about it. But to me, it's interesting because that last degree of Pisces and the idea of a beginning. So maybe we could say a new beginning in a Piscean theme of maybe more spiritual awakeness or more inspired creative expression, which are 2 great ways to use Pisces. would be a nice way to use this one. So I don't want to really say a lot more about this. If anyone has any comments or questions about it, you're welcome to speak now, or if not, we'll move on. Okay, then we have a lunar eclipse, which I am going to go into some detail on. So here is the lunar eclipse, just all the planets there with no aspect lines, so you can peek at that a sec. And then I'll go to, I'll bring in now only the planets that I thought were the most important in the eclipse, which is here. So, once again, Uranus and Pluto at the party. We've got the Sun conjunct Uranus by 2 degrees. Pluto is squaring the Sun and Moon by about 1 degree. So when I get an eclipse that is strongly aligned with Uranus and Pluto, that to me, that's a juicy eclipse. Plus, the nodes are pretty close to the luminaries. We're only about 4.5 degrees off exact hit between the nodes themselves and the Sun and Moon. Does anyone not know what the nodes are? Would anyone like a brief astronomical explanation of what a node is? Because it's not a physical body, it's an imaginary point. Would anyone like an explanation of that, or should I? Okay, all right. So the nodes of the moon are created, you have to first understand the ecliptic, which is the imaginary line through the middle of the Sun and the Earth. And that creates this tabletop, and we sort of imagine, well, the planets are kind of rolling around on the tabletop as they do their orbits around the Sun, right? But in fact, no one stays exactly on the tabletop. They dip below it and they dip above it at various times. And the moon is pretty regular. Every 2 weeks it shifts. It dives down below as it goes below the tabletop, so to speak. That's the south node. And 2 weeks later, when it comes up above the tabletop, that's the north node. Okay? And the nodes themselves, circle around the whole zodiac about every 19 years. And
does that happen because the Earth is tilted and our view changes, or is the moon actually diving up and down?
No, that's from our perspective. The moon is
the Earth is tilting.
Right.
So we're looking down and we're looking up and we lose it off the horizon. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm a little fuzzy on the astronomy. What I explained to you is, can anyone give him a good answer better than I can about why the moon does that little wiggle every 2 weeks?
Do not all the constellations dip below that ecliptic line?
It's not so much.
Near it?
I'm not sure it's the constellations so much as the moving planets.
Okay.
In astrology, the word planet means wanderer. And we include the Sun and Moon among the planets because they appear to move against the fixed stars. So I apologize. I can't give you a proper answer to your question. If I learned that bit of astronomy, I've forgotten it. So I'm not a star student, I'm afraid. Okay. So anyhow, but we don't really have to know the meaning of the nodes technically to understand its astrological meaning, which means this lunar eclipse is a powerful time of releasing into transformation with Uranus and Pluto in the game. With the moon in Libra, that clues us in that maybe a good theme to focus on is relationships and creative expression, and the general vibe of harmony and balance and flow, which are also Libran themes. So those would all be sweet things to put your attention on. We also have Mercury in the mix. Mercury is fairly close, is very close to the nodes, and is an aspect to the Moon and Sun. So, to me, the Mercury South Node combo is maybe look at your old typical patterns of thinking. The South Node is more about the old way of things, and the North Node is more about the new thing you're moving into. So this eclipse around April 4th might be a great idea of what are my old thought patterns that aren't really serving me, and how can I bring a revolutionary transformation to them. And the other person in the game I wanted to mention is Jupiter, which is kind of expanding the whole thing very smoothly and harmoniously. So Jupiter adds a little bit of flow to the whole thing. So a little extra luck and a little extra expansion of the theme so you can see it a little more clearly. Jupiter is kind of like a magnifying glass. You can see it a little more clearly when Jupiter's in the game. So that's the key thing I wanted to say about the lunar eclipse on April 4th. Any questions on that one? Yes?
Is that eclipse one of the tetrad?
I do not know. Can anyone answer it?
What was the question?
Tetrad? You mean the 4 blood moons?
Yeah, the 4 blood moons.
I do not know. One thing I've learned in life is to immediately admit my ignorance when it exists. Okay, any other questions on this one? All right. So then we get the next important lunation I thought was the full moon of June 2nd. Now we're into summertime. So again, I'll show. Here's the whole thing, and here's, in my opinion, the most critical planets. T-square. So the fact that I've got Mars and Mercury and the Neptune involved in this full moon. So first we take the basics. The full moon is about, again, releasing or taking stock of things. Here we got Sagittarius. So a full moon in Sagittarius, themes of higher learning. Sagittarius has the meanings of joy, expansion, celebration, enthusiasm. So that might be, look at, am I getting enough of that in my life? We all need a certain amount of that to be a healthy human being. So am I having enough joy going on? And more specifically, Sagittarius has to do with religion, philosophy, the meaning of life, higher education, foreign cultures, hopefully not just being a rude tourist, but actually getting some wisdom and insight from the culture that you're either traveling into or exposing yourself to somehow. So those are all good things to contemplate. With all the Gemini action, with Mars and Mercury there, it's like putting a lot of thought into that, and Gemini loves variety, so maybe if you're feeling kind of stuck in your approach, one dark side way Sag can play is like the soapbox preacher who just absolutely knows he's right, even if he isn't, and being absolutely certain of your beliefs. I'm 54 now, and what I have learned is there's times when I had a certainty of belief around something that I then would discover either I was flat out wrong, or there's a larger truth encasing that smaller truth. And this gets into the theory of holons, H-O-L-O-N's. Ken Wilber talks about this a lot. The idea that there's always a larger sphere around the sphere you're looking at, and a greater perspective available there. A classic example is a lot of people think this 3D world is all there is, just the physical world. But in fact, based on my experience, there is a vast spiritual reality beyond it. And the physical world is like a tiny grain of sand on a massive beach compared to all the reality that's out there. So, but you don't know that until you've actually experienced it yourself, and then you get a grasp of it. Just like you have an atom, which is part of a molecule, which is part of a cell, which is part of a body, which is part of a society, which is part of a planet, which is part of a solar system, which is part of a galaxy. You get the idea. All holonic expansions. Okay, so this full moon on June 2nd might be a fabulous time to, Mars, Mercury, pioneer your thoughts around. Now the certainties I'm working with, my beliefs, am I really sure? Do the Byron Katie work. Is that true? Then you ask, am I absolutely sure that's true? Ask again. And with Neptune there, even though it's a square, which could lead to confusion, I found the operation of Neptune in the sky or in a person's chart has a lot to do with the person's level of consciousness. Those who are not very awake to their true essence, the spiritual essence, tend to experience Neptune as confusion and fog and drifting and deception, more of its dark side. But the more awake a person is, the more Neptune actually brings intuitive insight. So if you're a little more awake, then the Neptune setup with this lunation is going to enhance your ability to connect with your divine even more powerfully and receive your intuitive information more clearly. And then the square, rather than challenge you, just brings a sense of urgency. That intuition may come in saying, you really need to be aware of this now, or this action would be a really good idea to take right now. Okay? So, any questions on any of this full moon interpretation for June 2nd?
Who was the guy you referred to about those holons?
Ken Wilber, W-I-L-B-E-R.
Yeah.
He is the best-selling philosopher in America right now.
Yeah.
Amazing thinker. Yeah. I went through a period a few years ago where I read a lot of his books. Okay, so any other questions, comments before we move on? Okay, next aspect is Saturn re-enters Scorpio. Now, the fact that it's coming back into Scorpio lets us know that it's going to move into Sagittarius this year, 2014. Okay, Saturn spends about 2.5 years in each sign. He takes a 30-year journey roughly around the chart. And so when he backpedals into Scorpio, that means he's going to spend a few months there. We'll see later in 2015 he'll come back into Sagittarius. So what I'll say about the Scorpio part of this is that, Saturn in Scorpio has been a very juicy time, largely because he has been in mutual reception to Pluto and Capricorn. Who understands the concept of mutual reception already? Okay, some of us. Okay, it just means we're in each other's signs. Okay, if you accept modern rulership, then Pluto rules Scorpio, Saturn rules Capricorn, Pluto's in Capricorn, Saturn's in Scorpio. They're in each other's signs. And that gives them a strong connection more than would normally be true just because they're making an aspect to each other. Okay? So the last couple of 2.5 years, while Saturn has been in Scorpio and will spend just a few months here in 2015 there as well, it's been about the whole thing is structural breakdown of the structures that don't serve us, and structural revolution, the bringing power to the new structures that do serve us. I already spoke about the idea that we're seeing in society globally a massive breakdown of old structures that don't serve us, and although it's not in the headlines, these new, more harmonious structures are rising. If you're in tune with the Asheville culture, there's a lot of people here who are creating the new reality already. I have the bumper sticker on my car, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And I know a lot of people who are doing that. Okay? And I'm being called intuitively to add just my own belief is that the most important change is the one in yourself. Because once you make the transformation in yourself, it radiates energetically to the whole world and in fact the whole universe. So if you really want a big change in the world, job one, I believe, is healing yourself, coming to the peace within yourself, because your outer reality is always a direct reflection of the state of being inside you. If you are in conflict and pain in yourself, then you're going to spread that to the world whether you want to or not. You can't help it. If you are holding harmony and peace within yourself, then that is what you will contribute. So I would encourage each of you, do your work in the world as you're called, but don't forget your inner work. And no matter how much inner work you've done, there always seems to be another piece. Yay! You never get bored. Okay, so that's a little bit on Saturn and Scorpio, the basic idea of take the old structures that don't serve you and destroy or transmute them so they're functional again. And take the new structures that are rising to serve the proper moment now and give them juice, give them power. So any questions on Saturn popping back into Scorpio for a few months? All right. Then we've got another full moon, July 1st of 2015. Again, here's all the planets. And then here's the ones that I think are most important. We've got a grand cross this time. That's like a big old geometrical square. And this time we've got, once again, the moon and sun are again aligned. Now this time, Uranus is not in the game. How about that? So at this point, Uranus has advanced far enough that it's not a member of the Grand Cross. It will be back later in the year, as you'll see. But here is a full moon in Capricorn. And Capricorn, again, full moons are take stock, release, adjust. So Capricorn's about your work in the world, your career, your job, your reputation, the visible things you're doing that you're known for. So a good time to take stock of that with the moon and Pluto together. Obviously release the things that are not serving you. If you're not doing the job you're really here to do for your livelihood, then change it if you can, because the nodes are on the corners here of the Grand Cross. And the nodes are reminding you, can you bring your livelihood, Moon and Capricorn, into alignment with your life purpose? I spent most of my life working for the man. Once I moved here after a few years, I started following my mission. I came here to be a singer-songwriter. I became an astrologer, and I'm doing other things as well. And I now live my life purpose. I'm doing for a living what I would love to do even if I wasn't being paid for it. But please keep paying me. Because in this materialistic culture, you got to have money to keep it going.
Which pass the donation basket?
Oh, that is a good cue, isn't it? Where is the basket? Did we ever find one? Okay.
Did we find one?
Well, tell you what, we got the donation ceramic bowl. So this will do the job. Thank you for reminding me, Ronnie. So I would say this full moon of July 1st would be a great time to contemplate your livelihood. Is some kind of transformation appropriate for you? Now again, if you hit something like this with Pluto in the game and you're in alignment with it, Pluto says, fine, we don't need to change anything. Let's just juice it up some more. More power to what you're already doing. So that can be a lovely way to use this. If you're getting around July 1st and you feel awesome with what you're doing, then chances are you're doing the right thing at the moment. Okay?
Now you said that's a good time to contemplate. Would it be a good time to act on making the change?
Generally speaking, it's better to act under waxing moons than waning, in terms of major new initiations.
Prior to that.
Or after, But again, you would also want to take this into your own chart and see what's being hit in terms of your own unique natal chart. I'm being as specific as I can here, but fact is, some people will have one of these things happen, and it'll be a life changer for them, and the next person over will feel no effect whatsoever, because that first person had it hit a line up right on a sensitive point, and the other person did not. So, doing general astrology like this has general truth to it, but your mileage will vary based on how it's actually hitting your own natal chart. Okay, so any questions on this particular, and again, once again, we have Vesta, the asteroid goddess, in the mix, reminding us once again, can what you're doing, Moon in Capricorn, serve not just your own selfish needs, but can it contribute to the greater good as well? Okay? And I need to just make up I bring my personal life philosophy very much into my interpretations. It's not much of a secret how I think from the way I'm speaking here. So if your beliefs are different, then feel free to disregard anything I say.
Might you say something about the fact that these are all cardinal signs all through the year, except for the mutables?
Well, the fact is, as always, the lunations are happening through all of the signs, mutable and cardinal, etc. And I did not pick these lunations just because they were hitting cardinal signs, but that was not a conscious choice. But in fact, because the Uranus-Pluto square has been the big theme, it's been the lunations in cardinal signs that were making quadrature aspect to those that caught my attention, because they were lining up with the most powerful thing happening in the sky. So, cardinal is initiation and getting things going. So because, the big action in the sky is cardinal with Uranus and Pluto there, that is like a dominant theme of the year. That's an excellent point, Ronnie. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I think the thing I feel is that cardinal is like a fast-moving train.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no getting around what's coming and what needs to happen. It's not like you can just waffle through it like a mutable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the times we're in now, I can't strongly enough recommend make the big changes at the fastest rate that serves your highest good. Don't try to hold your status quo. That will not serve you in the 2010s. That is not the theme. The theme here is to grow and evolve as fast as you can. And the opportunities for it are exceptional with these energies in the sky.
Choo-choo.
It's beneficial. Okay, then, finally a non-lunation aspect. We have a little bit of a T-square that's speaking July 20th. It's good for, I believe, a week coming and going, with Mars making that connection. So, again, this is Uranus bringing Uranus. As you can see, right now Uranus and Pluto are a little far away from each other. They're over 6 degrees, about 6.5 degrees apart. So they're a little distant. They're going to be swinging back together again here shortly. But a little bit of a T-square saying, this once again is a time when a little bit of revolutionary change is amplified, because we have a stimulator, Mars, of significance, amplifying Uranus and Pluto again. So we have the stage setters, Uranus, Pluto, and the trigger, Mars. Now this is, I thought twice about even putting this in here because the orb is so loose between Uranus and Pluto, but I thought, well, there is some energy there, so I'll throw that in there too in latter July. So a stimulus for revolutionary transformation. And again, with Mars in Cancer, again, family, your sense of security, the home, are themes that could be especially potent around that. Then we have a sign change. Every year, roughly, Jupiter changes signs, and Jupiter is currently in Leo. And on August 11, Jupiter will enter Virgo, and I put a little thing there to note where Jupiter was. So wherever Jupiter is for that year, that energy is a little bit more in the spotlight. It's not necessarily the main event or anything, but the high uses of Virgo are to pay attention to health and to service. And health, we all have a sense of how to help, eat the proper foods, diet, exercise, take enough time to relax and have fun, have a balanced life where you feel good vitality. In terms of service, an amplification towards service, but service is a little tricky for a lot of people. A lot of us are into codependent things, and we're serving in a way that doesn't serve us. So one of my favorite Virgo themes is, I get as good as I give. And what I mean by that is, yes, with Jupiter and Virgo, the urge to serve and help others will be great, but do it in the way that after you've done that piece of service, you think, you know what, I got such a great feeling from that, I would happily turn and do it again. I'm either getting enough financial compensation, or I'm getting a good enough feeling, or preferably both, you know? Well, I shouldn't say that. You know, so much great service is not financially rewarded, right? But make sure that you feel really good about it. There's an energetic payback of some kind. Otherwise, you're probably serving in a way that's not in alignment with your highest good. And I strongly encourage people to serve in accordance with your unique talents and gifts. Because, you know, you were given those gifts for a reason. You were not given them to neglect them. So if you've got a particular talent or gift, and it's not the basis of your service, ask yourself, is there some way I can make it the basis of my service? Because I was given that gift to use it.
Yeah. I have something to share about service.
Please.
The way that I've looked at it, in the highest aspect, is your contribution. And so when you say it's your contribution, your gifts, your talents, and your abilities, it doesn't sound like, service in a way that we think is demeaning or less than.
Right, contribution.
Your contribution.
Yeah, it's a little less loaded a word, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Okay, so Jupiter will be in Virgo through, it changes signs, I believe, in September of 2016. So we'll have a little more than a year of this one. And Jupiter will not leave Virgo until it goes into the next sign. Okay? All right, so any questions, comments on Jupiter Virgo? All right. Solar eclipse. Once again, this one, I didn't make a special second chart for this one, but I did want to note there is a solar eclipse on September 13th. If you don't already know, solar eclipses are like lunations on steroids. Typically, whereas a newer full moon will run a couple of weeks in terms of its strongest effect, typically an eclipse will be good for at least 6 months of effect. So it's a much longer lasting, it's just a much stronger effect. So here the solar eclipse is Virgo, so new beginnings in the Virgo themes I described, health, service. And another meaning of Virgo is the detail work, the little fine details of things. People with good Virgo energy typically can see the little things that can improve. I've got a Virgo moon myself in a loaded 6th house, which is the Virgo flavored house by nature, and I never stop improving. Today, I'm for the first time using my wireless mouse with my presentation, and I'm using some new software for the presentation. I took it to the next level yet again. So people with a lot of Virgo are constantly tweaking and refining as a matter of course. I remember back when I was working for Nabisco Food Service, I had a manager said, being a success in the salesperson is not about doing one thing amazingly well, it's about doing 1,000 things a little bit better. A Virgo statement to the end. So anyhow, the Virgo solar eclipse, a great time here on September 13th for new beginnings in those areas. The detail work, your organization and methodologies, which is Virgo territory, your health, your service, your contribution, all that is nicely supported here. There is one aspect that's probably worth noting here, which is even though the Sun and Moon together, they are opposing Chiron. And Chiron is the most Virgo planet out there. Okay, the meaning of Chiron is the wounded healer. And healing is one of the things that Virgo does. Okay, so any new beginnings around healing or mentoring, which are the two core high side Chiron things, are great here. Some people may find during or after this lunation that they get triggered a little bit more, which is Chiron's job. The way I view the whole triggering phenomenon is that we have to get our shit stirred up in order to clear it. I use an image sometime of a hot air balloon. Like we're a hot air balloon, we want to rise all the way up to heaven and be fully enlightened and blissful all the time. The problem is we still got all these sandbags roped to the gondola and they're keeping us too close to the ground. Well, how do we cut off the sandbags, right? Well, the things keeping the sandbags on, this is the metaphor, of course, is the dense, heavy energy we have inside us. Okay, the old childhood wounds, the old karma from past lives, the family lineage stuff, whatever it's heavy, it's these layers of stuff that are keeping the light from shining fully, right? So most of us will not go clear that stuff proactively. So the universe has to trigger us. And every time you get upset or irritated or irked or anything that pulls you out of harmony, it's letting you know, hey, this is one of those things that was locked inside you being flushed out a little bit to the surface. when it's easiest to clear. I say it's like it was a solid locked inside you, and all of a sudden it's a gas on the surface. Much easier to blow that away, right? So if you have some methodology where once it's stirred up you can pull it away. You know, I did a presentation a while back where I gave my invocations for this group, and my healing invocation is just 7 words: maximum healing that serves highest good, please. You say those words out loud or mentally to your divine self, and then you passively breathe, and it's like a shower gets turned on and the energy just flows down and flushes away whatever got stirred up. So that's one technique of many that can help you when you get triggered to clear things away. Now there's many awesome techniques out there to do that. That's the one that I was inspired to share pretty regularly with folks. So if that helps you, use it. Yes?
I was just seeing an opportunity that might arise with that opposition. Virgo, Pisces, Chiron and Pisces is to shine a light on this level of victim consciousness that often is one of the sandbags that keeps people locked in to their emotional quagmire. So that's certainly an opportunity to rise above that. And I think the square to Pallas is going to bring in a higher level of consciousness as an opportunity to shift the mind, shift the thoughts, shift the philosophy to move out of that old paradigm.
I agree.
In a warrior mode, so cut to the quick.
Beautifully stated. Thank you. Yeah, if you're getting into that victimization role, ask yourself, what's the martyr with me? Okay, any other comments on the solar eclipse? I had to get at least one pun in. It's been 90 minutes and no puns. Who am I anyway? Okay. All right. Then we have a pretty significant alignment on September 17. Jupiter and Neptune oppose. I believe it's about 3 or 4 weeks either side of this coming and going. And these two have a common theme, actually. Jupiter is the ruler of religion. In other words, the mental constructs that man makes to approach the divine. And Neptune is the divine itself that is beyond any concept. Okay, so to have a Jupiter-Neptune opposition here on September 17 is a wonderful time to ask yourself, if I'm doing a spiritual path of some kind, are the things I'm doing at the ego level actually bringing me more into connection at the soul level? You know, a lot of people do a lot of practices and aren't making any noticeable, movement toward actual awakening. So, we are now at a time when the veils have gotten so incredibly thin that it's achievable. I give my core invocation a lot to people, some who have never meditated a day in their lives, and they're actually experiencing their peaceful real self like within 10 minutes. Just say maximum awakened consciousness that serves highest good, please, and go to passive breath awareness. It might amaze you how rapid a shift you can have just in making that statement and going to passive breath awareness, if you want to try that sometime. So maybe on September 17th, with Jupiter and Neptune opposing, when the systems you're using to approach the divine are totally connected with the divine itself. Neptune is about union with no separation, just oneness consciousness is what it represents in the spiritual way. You can also, receive lots of inspiration, Neptune, into anything Jupiter represents, your philosophy, your religion, your higher education. All that can be juiced up as well. Be aware, though, that a possible dark side way this could play, since Jupiter's nature is to amplify whatever's out there. Neptune and Pisces, Neptune's in its own sign of Pisces for quite a few years now, has a dark side too, as does everything in astrology. The dark side is excessive use of drugs or alcohol or substances of any kind, excessive escapist behavior. I'm just spending too much time with sex, food, TV, internet, games, anything that distracts me away from my responsibilities here in the 3D world. It's also the sense of drifting or aimlessness, and it can also be martyrdom, like Ronnie just brought out. Those are the 4 classic low sides of Neptune that I'm aware of. Okay? So if you find any of that's kind of going on under the Jupiter opposition, ask yourself, can I refocus my attention into connecting to the divine in a real way where I'm actually feeling it and not just thinking about it? Or if I'm getting a lot of creative inspiration, which is another way Neptune loves to bring information down, am I amplifying my efforts toward that? With Jupiter in Virgo, am I doing the things every day in a regular way that are allowing me to express that creativity into form? When I was studying writing years ago, I remember a quote from a writer who said, I only write when I'm inspired. Fortunately, I'm inspired at 9 a.m. every morning. true Virgo statement.
Confusion.
Confusion can be Neptune as well. So again, when mid-September hits and these guys come across, if you see those low side things showing themselves, just ask yourself, okay, how can I rewire this to go to the high side of the same archetypal energies and give myself a better experience? Your willpower, your intention is a very vital part of the mix. So if you don't like the way your life is playing, then change your thinking and the energy starts to shift. My own belief is that this physical whirlwind is a gigantic hologram. We're all co-creating at the same time. It has no fundamental reality at all. So if you want to change your life experience, start changing your consciousness on the inside, go for that more consistent peace and harmony, and magically, oh, my life's become more peaceful out here. How'd that happen? Oh, I changed my consciousness. I changed my thinking and my emotional reality, and things shifted out here. So you're creating it constantly all the time with every thought you think. So remember that now again, we're all of us humans are co-creating at the same time, so you with your own thought might not be able to cure the ISIS problem over in the Middle East, okay? But maybe you can make your own immediate reality a little more harmonious and flowing, and that will contribute to the overall harmony of the planet and move things a little more in that direction. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I see that it seems to me that this is kind of bringing in a shift away from the cardinal energy focus that we've had this past year and in the beginning half of this year, the beginning 3 quarters. So
right.
Now the mutable energies are starting to come in, because the very next day Mercury goes retrograde and Saturn moves into Sagittarius. And then the day after that, the Moon enters Sagittarius and conjuncts Saturn. So it's like we have this emotional recognition of these new energy patterns that are being brought in.
Exactly. Now, we're not done with the cardinals yet, but I agree with you that the mutables are coming a little more, and they're all there all the time.
Yeah, of course. But there's a major concentration of mutable energy during this year with Jupiter, Neptune, and Saturn all in mutable signs.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, that's a great contribution. Any other? I wasn't even using that ironically. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, so then, hey, Saturn enters Sagittarius on September 17th, just like you said. So Saturn's over there on the right at 0 Sag. And so this, again, I talked about Saturn still in Scorpio. But as it spends its 2.5 years in Sagittarius, wherever Saturn goes, it first challenges the structures that don't work, and then it helps build new structures that work better. So all the things represented by Sagittarius, like religions, okay, and philosophies and meanings of life, and the way you're educating yourself, are up for both reconsideration. If you find that the foundation of those things for you is not as stable as it maybe should be, ask yourself, well, is it that I have not, put sufficient faith and energy into this, or is it maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree and I need to rethink what I'm doing? Okay, so Saturn is very good. Again, my mentor Kelly Phipps had all these cute phrases he taught me. He says, Saturn writes the reality checks. So when Saturn comes into a sign and something in that sign is not optimal for you, then look, does it need to be restructured, or maybe just demolished completely so a better building can come up in its place? But again, if you're Sagittarian themed things in your life, that I've already given you the Sagittarian themes, if they're great, then they'll remain solid and say, hey, we got a wonderful 1-story house, let's build a 2nd story, let's make more of it, more structure, because you got such a great start already. So Saturn's not a bad guy. He's actually one of our best planets of all, because he lets you know when something ain't working, and he'll let you know in a way that you kind of have to deal with it. So no bad guys. So any other questions about Saturn and Sag? Okay, then we have another lunar eclipse on September 27th, and this one is in Aries. And what struck me about this one is there's a very tight asteroid goddess set up here. So on the 27th, we have the Moon tightly conjunct Vesta, her 3rd appearance in this presentation. And one we haven't talked about yet, the Sun is very tightly conjunct Juno, which looks like the asterisk with the cross under it down there. And Juno is more a representative of domesticity. Now, Juno was the queen of the gods, so no small shakes there. But she, in the interpretation is normally thought of as the one who kind of held down the home fires while Zeus went out and did whatever he was doing in Greek mythology. So the question here is, the opposition is between domesticity and being in the home environment versus Vesta, which is out doing your sacred service. So a very interesting thing to contemplate under the lunar eclipse of September 27 would be, how am I working that balance between home and service out in the world? And Vesta is in Aries, saying, dynamic, energetic, forceful service, new beginnings in service perhaps. And Juno in Libra is saying, well, let's make sure we've got all the relationships taken care of and making sure, my domestic relationships are being handled properly. To me, it suggests not defaulting from one to the other, but saying, I've got to keep the domestic balance here good too. The home has to be good. The relationships here need to be solid. But I also need to be a little bit adventurous and get out there into the world. Again, the sun and moon and the nodes are fairly tight. They are almost exactly 4 degrees off exact. That's a fairly tight eclipse, so this one's a pretty juicy one as well. Again, there's no other squares to this lunation, and there weren't a lot, for me, I didn't see a lot of other major aspects to the sun and moon. So for me, it's mostly about the asteroid goddesses on this one. Mercury's in there a little bit too, communication themes, perhaps in the family, because Mercury and Juno are bracketing the sun. So a great time with this lunar eclipse also to look at communication issues with your family of origin and your family you've married into, if that's the case for you. So any questions on the September 27 lunar eclipse? That full moon on steroids. Okay. We see how we're tracking for time. We're doing great. Then we've got a new moon. And again, what I thought was important about the October 12 new moon was, there's Uranus-Pluto again. So they oppose Uranus, they square Pluto. So new beginnings in Libra, which is family, harmony, relating, creativity. Libra is the sign of the artist. And any kind of new revolutionary energy you feel impelled to do there under that new moon would be great. I'm going to accelerate just a bit because I want to have some time for the United States stuff too before we close. Then in October, there's three things that Mars is doing. It's on the 15th, it's trine Pluto. The 17th, it conjoins Jupiter, and the 24th, it quincunxes Uranus. No one of these is like a deal breaker event, and none of them individually would have been enough to be in the presentation, but the fact that all three are happening within like a week and a half got my attention. So you may find that the latter half of October is a little bit more tumultuous and a lot more perhaps unsettled energy, with Mars making aspects to Uranus and Pluto, even though they're not the strongest ones. So just the latter half of October, just stay on your toes a little bit, follow the intuitive flashes, take my basic Uranus-Pluto prescription, maybe under advisement during that period that I already talked about. Then, full moon on November 25th. I picked this one because it's got the Saturn-Neptune square in it. So this lunation aligns with Saturn and Neptune, which are the law of attraction planets, like I already talked about. So to me, November 25th, right around Thanksgiving of 2015, would be fabulous for taking stock of, are there things I really desire in my life that aren't here yet, and would this be a good time to step up and use law of attraction consciously to bring those in? Would be, I'd say, a shorthand for this one. Then we have another exact Saturn-Neptune square, the second one of 2015, on November 26th. And I've already told you about that, since we saw that already, so I won't repeat myself except say law of attraction, big opportunity again. Now we're into December. There is a T-square here with Mars and Vesta and Pluto and Uranus on the 9th. So really nice time here to move into your feminine assertiveness with, I'm sorry, that's, I actually made a typo there. That is not Vesta, it's Pallas Athena. So my apologies for the typo on the slide. It's Pallas Athena there, conjunct Pluto. So great time to step into your feminine assertiveness. And there's Mars in the feminine sign of Libra, saying assertiveness and the feminine nature as well. So ladies, get your assertiveness on in the areas where it's time to amp it up a little bit. And that's the end of the general slide presentation. Any questions on anything I've talked about before we go into the U.S. stuff? This is an extremely challenging year for the United States. There are several things that hit repeatedly. January 5th, something happens that's going to happen 3 times this year. It's Pluto opposing the U.S. Sun. That's the big one. Okay, that would be enough. So here's Pluto, 13, really 19. The U.S. Sun is 13, 19. If I recall, Pluto is going to oppose the U.S. Sun 3 times in 2015. Pluto is death and rebirth. Metaphorically, it's the phoenix burning to ash and resurrecting, the snake shedding its skin, the caterpillar melting down and becoming the butterfly on the other end. Okay, and the Sun, of course, is the personality of the nation. And so now we're doing mundane astrology. This is the chart of a country, the United States. And just for the record, I'm using the Sibley chart, which is the one most commonly used by astrologers. There are other competing charts for the U.S. birth time, but this seems to be the one that most people use for July 4th, 1776, 5:10 p.m., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So what you're seeing here is on the inside wheel is the actual natal chart of the United States, and on the outer wheel are the moving planets, and the lines in the middle are the energetic connections being made. And the thicker the line is, the more exact it is. And I'll be showing you the things that are hitting exactly. So Pluto opposed the Sun means the death of that which does not serve the U.S. In a country's chart, the Sun can also be the leader. In this case, it would be President Obama. And he's under no shortage of stress right now, as I'm sure you're aware. The Republicans have just swept the midterm elections, and they have a majority in both houses now. So he feels very much under attack, which would be a perfect example of Pluto opposing the U.S. Sun, of opposition to the leader, powerful opposition. Of course, they've been opposing him for years, and Pluto has been, either exactly opposing or applying to opposition to the U.S. Sun for several years already. When Pluto makes I exaggerated there. Pluto actually has a 3-year, the way I measure it, strong orb of power. The orb I use for powerful transit is if it's 3 degrees either side of the aspect, it's really strong. If it's within 5 degrees either side, that 4 to 5 degree window, it's moderately strong. Beyond 5 degrees, I don't really see a whole lot of influence. But the power zone for Pluto, because it moves so slowly, is about 3 years from the time it first gets within 3 degrees of the aspect applying to when it leaves 3 degrees separating. Does everyone follow what I just said? Okay. All right, so here it is exact 3 times in 2015.
Well, what did you say that Pluto opposite the Sun means death of that which is not what?
Death of that which has outlived its usefulness. Okay. So it's usually a time of very strong challenge. People who get Pluto opposed to the Sun typically are going through very powerful personal crises. Sometimes it will be a death in their family, or someone close to them will die. They'll experience psychological death and rebirth. They will release things that maybe they've been doing or believing for a long time, and they're kind of in unknown waters as the new thing develops. Pluto is typically a slow, muddy kind of transit. The dust is in the air for a long time typically. And we're seeing it perfectly in the U.S. right now. Obama is very much under attack by the Republicans. The U.S. itself, is no longer the shining paragon of virtue that many believed it to be. Most Americans now understand there's a lot of very nasty business being done politically in the U.S. and by big business. So kind of like the veneer is off, and we're seeing the dirty underbelly more than we ever have before. So that's kind of a little bit of what's going on with that. So it looks like for the U.S. it potentially is a year of big change. And now again, in an individual chart, I've been really harping on how you yourself can constantly use the energy to have a good outcome from it. It gets a little trickier with a country because you're working with the collective mass consciousness of the people. Okay, and while many people are awakened and awakening in the U.S., I think the majority are still pretty asleep. Okay,
at least half.
Probably. Okay. Now, I do believe that there are more awakening every day, but still, we're probably going to have quite a bit of challenge this year because of Pluto opposed the U.S. Sun. It's just a big, intense, difficult thing to deal with, and I think we'll see a lot of change in the country in 2015 as a result.
About when the new Congress comes in, too, isn't it?
It is actually.
It's the first week of January, I think.
It's somewhere in January. Yeah.
Does that mean on that day? Or is that just...
No. Like I said, slow planets aren't timers. They're stage setters. Yeah. So Pluto is opposed to the Sun all year pretty much for the U.S. So the whole year is going to be an intense, big transformation time for the country. Okay. Now there's an amazing number of transits. Like, for example, on February 2nd, I'm not going to have time to hit all of them, but just the highlights. Uranus is also, now here on February 2nd, Uranus is square the U.S. Sun. So they won't always hit it the same, but Uranus square the Sun is about big, intense change happening very rapidly. Again, Pluto by itself, it grinds very slowly and deliberately, and things get worn down. But Uranus is like the lightning strike. I want it yesterday. And when you get Pluto and Uranus in combination, where they're both working the U.S. Sun at the same time here, big change can happen very quickly. So it can come in the form of catastrophic surprise and things happening shocking and suddenly that we view as negative, or it can be very amazing, powerful, positive breakthroughs. So I like Shakespeare's line, nothing is inherently good or bad, its thinking makes them so. I tweaked that just a little bit, but you get the idea. So, it would be a good time for Obama to be following his intuitive flashes if he does that sort of thing. And it's a time when the U.S. can really reinvent itself. To have the Uranus-Pluto square on the U.S. Sun is a time of, national reinvention, potentially. And it'll be interesting to see how he works with the Republicans over the next 2 years to kind of reinvent the country. And, if both sides are willing to be flexible enough to try to find some common ground for the greater good and not just continue the political shenanigans and maneuvering that seem to have been the dominant thing lately.
Capricorn rule the political system, Congress, etc.
Capricorn rules all large, significant structures like that, so I think that would probably be a good. It may not be the only ruler, because Jupiter is also directly ruling politics. But Capricorn is definitely the old status quo, the old boys club, the way it's always been done. Status quo power structures. But so is Pluto. So I think there's a number of planets that can kind of do that. Let me check others. We also have, now in the U.S. chart, the Sun and Saturn natally are square. And while Saturn is not an angular ruler in the chart, it is in the 10th house. So Saturn, what that means in English is that the 10th house is your career, your reputation for a country. It's how they're seen by the world and their general reputation. Saturn is the only major planet in that house. And so, and for a long time, the U.S. has been seen as the global authority. We are the only superpower, right? Saturn, we are the authority, the one in charge, right? And because the Sun and Saturn are tightly square, Saturn's getting all the same hits that the Sun is, just a little bit later, because it's about a degree after the Sun in number. But we get Pluto square Saturn on February 21st exactly. I'll just bring the chart up there. So there's Pluto square Saturn. That Saturn is old structures. Uranus is, getting ready to oppose it himself. Another thing, the Saturn itself, these structures visible to the world under big change. I read The Week every week. I love it because it's a real balanced view. It brings in left and right and international opinion all in one sweet, read. And the U.S., the world is watching us with great interest. Why are these Republicans doing all this stuff? Why are they fighting us so hard? Why is the U.S. politics so dysfunctional? They like Obama, it seems. They think he's trying to do good things, apparently, but they're kind of perplexed at the political things going on here. So this is our reputation, and again, the opportunity for revolutionary transformation. It's possible under this that, the Republicans can say, why don't we do things for the good of the country that are not just about the continuing of our particular agenda, but something that helps the Americans as a whole. And that's one possible revolutionary change that might happen under this aspect. Maybe I'm a Pollyanna on that, but a guy can hope.
I hope you're right.
But it is a time when there will be big change, whether we perceive it to be for better or worse. This is not a stable time for the U.S. It's a time of huge shift, with both the Sun and Saturn receiving Uranus and Pluto in a very powerful, direct, and repeated way.
Legal changes involving law.
Thank you. Because, for example, the two examples I give around Uranus-Pluto in this country right now is the amazingly rapid spread of gay marriage being illegal and the spreading legalization of marijuana. 10 years ago, who would have thought that could have happened so fast? Either one of them. but here they are changing rapidly. When Uranus and Pluto come together, the big changes can happen very rapidly. Okay. Now the seeds of both those were planted back in the 60s, though. So the seeds planted at the conjunction, Uranus and Pluto together, blossom at the square and the opposition and the waning square in a really big, powerful way. So that's why we're seeing the big shifts happen now when Uranus and Pluto are at the square point.
But it's interesting that women's rights seem to be being held back, whereas, abortion rights began back in what was it, 73?
Right, and there's still a lot of struggle around that.
And all of a sudden, just, with the Tea Party and everything, it's just
yeah. Well, again,
suppressing women more and more.
Well, the Uranus-Pluto square is also, now Pluto in Capricorn can represent the forces of conservative power.
Yeah.
Saturn is Capricorn with the sign is the old status quo. Pluto is, my will be done. I will control and dominate you, right? So that's that way Pluto. Yeah, exactly. So that's still in play.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when's that change?
I don't know.
Some people think of Pluto as the matriarch.
The matriarch?
Yeah.
Like Kali?
Matriarchal energy, yeah. Well,
Oh.
could be Kali, but stepping into your power, and the Capricorn is a feminine sign. It's an earth sign.
Good point.
So there is that opportunity, especially with the asteroids being active.
That's true. Yeah. So there's a lot of dust is in the air, and this is a time when if you want to be an agent for change, it's a real good time to do it, because the things are stirred up, things are in the air. People can make more of a difference now under these kind of energies than most other times astrologically. So rather than give you a lot of specific hits, I've literally got probably 30 specific transits to the U.S. chart. But I will mention that Chiron also is going to get strong. Chiron here is at 20, and later in the year Uranus will conjunct Chiron, and that's the wounded healer guy. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Now Pluto won't get to it in 2015, but Uranus will start again. That can be accelerated healing and new wisdom coming out in a real powerful way. It could also be really intense, surprising wounding. And with a country, you tend to get both sides of it. A country has a lot of consciousness on dark and light, so the dark and light tend to manifest in most cases.
Sorry, what was the aspect of Chiron you were mentioning?
Conjunction. So later in the year, Uranus here. Let me go to months so I can. I'll just pull it up here on the chart here. Just a minute. So on August 25th, for example, Uranus is on Chiron.
Okay.
But let me try that again. August 25th, 2015. Yeah, so there's Uranus on Chiron, late August.
Oh, yes.
So that's a powerful one as well. So, without going into excessive detail on the U.S. chart, there's plenty of hits all over the place. But those themes, the Pluto and Uranus hitting the Sun and Saturn are the headlines, and then the Uranus conjunct Chiron I thought was very powerful as well. So the bottom line is a very tumultuous year for the U.S., a lot of revolutionary transformation in the air. And I'll remind you, too, this is not just a passive show. Every one of us who makes conscious change radiates the energy of that change. So if you do your little bit to come to your own possible greatest peace and harmony within yourself, then you are actually helping the collective come to that as well. My own belief is if a person attained awakening and they sat in a room and never interacted with another human being for the rest of their life, they would still help to awaken humanity because they automatically radiate that energy out into the photosphere or the mass conscious sphere and help a little bit everyone else get there too. So every thought you think actually radiates to the mass consciousness, and doing that more consciously and deliberately the best you can is a great service, in a very subtle way, but a very powerful one. And that seems a good thing to say as to close with any last questions or comments before we wrap it up tonight?
I just keep thinking about Pluto having to do with resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be more of a momentum shifting out of the fossil fuel, and also people standing up for all of a lot of our resources going to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's got to be balanced.
Yeah.
It's draining.
Yeah, my own belief is that the entire global civilization is vastly going in the wrong direction because we can't keep growing and expanding with a limited resource base. And already many parts of the world are seeing a lot of things not having enough of them. And so
Water.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Yeah, a lot of drought in the U.S. West, for example, and other countries. So,
The whole world.
yeah. So a resumption of the old, native paradigm. In native cultures, they say we live in harmony and balance. We don't take any more than we need. We maintain homeostasis with the environment instead of just treating it like a resource to be abused. That's why I think the awakening is so important. Those of you who are awakening or have awakened, you know that everything's alive. And human is just one consciousness among the trees and animals, and it's all alive, it's all awake, it's all real, even the rocks are awake. And when we begin to have that sacred respect for the world around us, we live in harmony with it and we don't exploit it unnecessarily. And that's why you've got to heal your own wounds if you're going to stop wounding the planet. So, my own belief has always been that the change within the human is critical in the first step, because until the human has come into harmony with themselves, they will continue to wreak disharmony upon the world. So job one is your own healing, and then the more you heal within yourself, the more harmonious good you can do out there. That's my own belief.
I heard today that the Native American tribe of where the pipeline's supposed to come through have said today, I think yesterday, that the Republican Party has declared war on them, and they will not allow that pipeline to go across their sacred land.
Wow, good for them.
They came out very strongly.
Good. They must have heard about the midterms.
Well, maybe we'll have another war with the Native Americans.
We'll see. It's an interesting time.
One thing about Pluto-Uranus and this, remember back to the 60s, but watch the backlash. That can be, there is a dark side. And,
Oh, yeah.
So it takes courage.
You mean like the conservative forces lashing back? The Empire Strikes Back kind of idea?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, they
power versus freedom, I think, is a big theme
Yeah,
of Pluto and Uranus.
absolutely. Yeah, so the powers that be probably will not go down without a fight.
There you go.
Just remember, love is the healer.
Yeah.
If someone's acting in a bad way, it's not that they're a bad person. It's just that they've got some bad ideas or some wounds in there that still haven't healed yet. Everyone's the beautiful divine love at the core, and when you start awakening to that, you can find better ways to interact with them, maybe than just go into battle with them. Okay, so enough philosophizing. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much for watching my 2015 astrology forecast. Please subscribe to my Benjamin Bernstein YouTube channel to be notified when I post new videos. And if you like this video, please share it. This free video forecast, as I mentioned, is affiliated with iTunes #1 astrology podcast, This Week in Astrology, which is also free. You can get my semi-monthly astrology forecast in writing by subscribing to my free email newsletter at astroshaman.com. Once you're there, you can link to my Facebook page where I post daily forecasts. My personal services include astrology, shamanic healing, and awakening activation. All are equally effective in person or long distance. My guarantee makes my services risk-free. If you don't feel that your experience was helpful, there's no charge. I also offer other great products and services, many of which are free. To learn more, visit astroshaman.com. Thanks again for watching my 2015 astrology forecast. I wish you infinite blessings as the stars light your way.